The PS5 Pro launched 6 months ago, so after hundreds of hours of PS5 Pro enhanced games, do I think this thing is worth the upgrade, and has my opinion changed since my initial review 6 months ago? Yep, that's right, the PS5 Pro has been out in the wild for 6 full months. When it first launched in November of 2024, it was an intriguing proposition and something I ultimately called an impressive yet inconsistent upgrade, alluding to the fact that the various Pro enhancements were sometimes great and sometimes not so much. But this has now been my main way to play PlayStation 5 for the last 6 months, and in that time I have played hundreds of hours of games across some small Pro enhancements to the biggest releases of the year so far. So with all of that time, do I think the Pro is now better than it was 6 months ago, or is it more of the same, a difficult upgrade for most people? Well, one thing is for sure, the Pro isn't for everyone. This is a tech enthusiast product through and through, with upgrades that some would consider minimal and others mandatory, like ray tracing, higher resolutions and higher frame rates. Does that make it a bad thing? No, I don't really think so, because the way I would see it is, would it be worth every PC gamer buying the latest RTX 50 series graphics cards? No, because most people are going to be happy with their 40, their 30, even their 20 series, but that's still an option there for people that want to buy it. That's all to say that basically the base PS5 is going to be more than impressive enough for most people out there, especially when it's getting games like Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, which are just proving that the console still packs a punch. But when we talk about the difference between the two, has the visual or performative gap become more noticeable in the 6 months since launch? One of my biggest gripes with this console back on launch was the fact that some upgrades were really night and day, primarily the first party titles where you could play something like The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered at 4K and upwards of 90 frames per second. But then you had some other games that were very slightly improved, I suppose. Like, if you didn't tell me, I maybe probably wouldn't know. But I have to say, in the 6 months since, I think most games are actually delivering noticeable upgrades over the base PS5. That gap is widening. But there is an interesting dichotomy there in what Pro Enhanced exactly means from game to game. I mean, let's look at a game like Monster Hunter Wilds, which has a noticeable improvement from the base PS5 to the PS5 Pro version of the game. But does that make it a great Pro enhancement? Not really, in my opinion, because the Pro Enhanced version is kinda like what the base PS5 version should be, and the base PS5 version is actually pretty rough, in my opinion. You aren't really getting an enhanced high-end gaming version of Wilds with the Pro, you're just kind of getting what I think should have been the minimum. But then, on the contrary of that, you have a game like Assassin's Creed Shadows, which was a pretty damn good looking game on base PS5, but elevated it with the Pro enhancement, with a lot of effort put into lighting in particular, but also resolution and frame rates. It's not to say that the base version was bad in any kind of way, no, it wasn't. It's just that the Pro version actually did enhance the experience. It added in those bells and whistles that kind of define the point of this console. We've also had some Pro patches for some older games released as well, like Returnal, which had a 2.5 times increase to pixel density, and it really is quite noticeable when you check it out. But that does bring me on to what is probably maybe a nitpick, but one of my biggest issues with the Pro, and that's that most of the time when we get a Pro enhanced version, that's all we really know about it, unless the developer says otherwise. On the PlayStation Store, there's no details on how these games are being improved, and that does mean for some of them you're kind of looking at them like, what are the differences here? That maybe speaks to the kind of upgrades we're getting for some games, and with the original settings being removed in a Pro Enhanced version, you're really going to struggle to see the difference for a lot of games unless you have them side by side. It's something that bugged me back on launch because every game does it differently, so I would love for Sony to put a bit more work into actually being open about what the Pro is doing for each game, because at this point it's really down to you to seek out those changes. But I don't really want to get too much into the technical here in this review. There's a lot of that in my original review, which you can see. What I want to talk about right now is my honest opinion about the Pro. As someone that loves great looking games, as someone that plays on an OLED TV with VRR support, I love the PS5 Pro. If someone were to take away this console from me today, I would miss it, I really would. The games that I personally sunk quite a bit of time into this year, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Assassin's Creed Shadows, the finals, have had genuinely noticeable differences. And because of that, it's left me eager to test out some of the upcoming games like Arc Raiders and Hell Is Us and Ghost of Yote. But I have to say there is a really big caveat in my situation that I think a lot of reviewers will probably skim over, and that's the fact that I didn't pay for this console. I have an intrinsically different kind of relationship with this thing because I didn't shell out £700 of my hard-earned cash. So whether it's worth it 6 months down the line is a hard thing for me to actually answer. Do I think it's overpriced? Absolutely, especially without the disk drive, but I also think that the base PS5 is starting to push it a little bit as well. I mean, there's actually only £270 of a difference between the digital PS5 and the PS5 Pro. With that £270, you're getting an extra terabyte of storage and of course all of the technical improvements. So while you could talk about the money aspect of it all, I think you're likely going to know the kind of person you are in relation to products like these. I mean, when it comes to something like switching to PC, you're probably going to know whether that's something you would actually do without me having to really convince you otherwise. I covered the whole should I just get a PC instead thing in my original review, but I think it still kind of stands here. You aren't getting the kind of performance out of a PC for $700 that you do out of the Pro. However, it is a sort of dynamic situation. A PC offers you more than just gaming. You can use it for just life stuff, and it can be the foundation of a project that you upgrade over the years. And of course, the elephant in the room here is that you have to accept the fact that in roughly 3 years time, let's say, there's going to be a new PlayStation, so the PS5 Pro will be outdated basically. But if you're like me, then PlayStation is your home for gaming. I love the trophies, I love that I have a profile with all of my games on it, all of my friends are on here. It's where I love to come to game. And that for me is why I've chosen the Pro over PC. I actually have a PC that can game quite well, but still, I choose the Pro. I want the higher end graphics, I want the higher end performance, but I don't want to sacrifice the simplicity and the accessibility that the PS5 Pro offers me. If you're thinking about upgrading from the PS4 or PS5, then outside of the price of it all, you have to consider what the Pro is actually offering you and whether that's something you would actually get the most out of. Do you care about frame rates? Do you care about resolutions? Do you have a television that supports higher frame rates and VRR? These are the kind of questions you should be asking yourself before you look at the PS5 Pro, regardless of whether this was 6 months ago on launch or today. While price is such a big defining factor, it's ultimately about how much you could get out of a product and how much you really want it. And ultimately, while the graphics and the performance differs, the Pro has somewhat consistently offered the best way to play these games for the last 6 months. And it's down to you whether you think that's worth it. It might sound like a bit of a cop-out because it kind of is in some ways, but I think price in money is such a dependent thing on the person, because like I don't care about clothes so much, so the idea of spending £25 or more on a t-shirt kind of hurts my brain, whereas I'm sure some of you wouldn't think twice about that. And it's kind of the same thing here. Like maybe I would sink a bit of money into a gaming console, but that's not really worth it for you. At the end of the day though, I have consistently chose to play games on the PS5 Pro over my base PS5, and that's going to remain to be the case until the PS6 comes out. It's not for everyone, and it never tried to be, and while the upgrades may vary, it has proven over the last 6 months that it is the best way to play PS5 games. Thank you everyone for making it to the end of the video. I really want to know what you are thinking about this. Are you still sitting on the fence about buying a PS5 Pro, or did you pick one up at launch? And in that case, what are you thinking about it 6 months down the line? Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're there, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more PlayStation video content just like this. Anyway, until next time, I've been Aiden, and this has been Push Square.